The federal indictment of Cleveland Guardians pitchers Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz has shaken Major League Baseball and raised serious questions about the growing intersection between sports and legalized gambling. Federal prosecutors in Brooklyn say the two pitchers took bribes as part of a scheme to rig bets on individual pitches, a case that could carry massive legal and ethical consequences for the league. To help us understand what this indictment means legally and how it could change the way major leagues handle betting and data integrity, we're joined by sports and entertainment attorney Dan Lust, also the host of the Conduct Detrimental podcast and a leading voice on sports law. Dan, long time no see. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Good. A pleasure. And let's just say, my spider sense has been tingling that we're going to get more and more of these. So certainly happy to be on and appreciate the call.
Anytime. It's a very interesting time in sports, especially around the legality and sports betting and how this impacts leagues and all of that. But Dan, from a legal standpoint, what stands out to you the most in this indictment? Are federal prosecutors essentially accusing these players of game fixing, or is this being framed more as a fraud and bribery case?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I think if you do the math, each guy's looking at three different charges, combination of bribery, fraud, money laundering. It's decades in prison is what these guys are looking at. But you asked me what stands out the most. In this day and age in 2025, we have this technological component. And for lack of a better term, it's when you hear in the news this suspicious betting activity, and that's when these sites, these third parties can look at and see if something looks odd, if an odd amount of money is being wagered on a particular prop or particular event, and that's based on individual users, normal tendencies, right? If someone's generally betting $100 a game and all of a sudden they're betting 10,000 on a particular event, but that's the type of evidence that's just generally hard to overcome. So again, everyone's innocent until proven guilty, but that technological component, that irregularity in the betting patterns, that's been hard to overcome in terms of the public sense. That's what stands out to me. These are certainly the betting patterns, the text messages. It doesn't look good at the outset.
Yeah, none of this looks really good. As you said, everybody is innocent until proven guilty. But we have to talk about this in terms of Major League Baseball as well, Dan, because the league, they have embraced legal sports betting through partnerships and then prop betting expansion in recent years. Does that increase the league's legal responsibility to monitor player activity or report suspicious wagering patterns?
Yeah, I mean, I would think so. And I speak at obviously, and Dexter, I'm on law school panels. I teach at law school, and we have this conversation about ethics. I think the toothpaste is out of the tube, so to speak. You're not pulling, DraftKings, FanDuel. You're not pulling these big markets off the table. And the question is, what does Major League Baseball do to combat this? And you could talk about, individual player tops, be it, Jonte Porter in the NBA or what's going on with Terry Rozier in the UFC with particular actors. The problem is that these bets are occurring with we'll call it like micro props, one player doing one thing that doesn't involve coordinated team activity. And it's going to take, be it Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA, one of these major sports to lay down the hammer on a particular actor and to show that this technological platform, this suspicious betting patterns, they'll catch anything, right? You can give your tip to somebody, right? To one, bad actor on the other side. But if that person shares it with 2, 3, 4, 5 people, and we could talk about Clase and Ortiz specifically here, those betting patterns are going to get flagged, and that's going to go to Major League Baseball, to the NBA, to the NFL before the actual event itself occurs, because you have to put the bets in ahead of time. So, I think Major League Baseball has to set an example at some point. And again, everyone is innocent until proven guilty, but maybe this is the example that they found someone with their hand caught in the cookie jar and they could set that example. But until that happens, I don't think players have gotten the message at this point.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting to see how, if Major League Baseball has to in this situation, sets that example, how harsh of a penalty that could be. And that kind of goes to where I wanted to get next with you, Dan, which is if these allegations are proven true, what kind of penalties could Clase and Ortiz be facing, both in terms of federal sentencing and then also disciplinary action from Major League Baseball?
Yeah, so I mean, we'll cross them at the same time, right? Like Major League Baseball doesn't need a criminal conviction in order to suspend someone for life, right? To ban them in not just give them the Pete Rose status, to ban someone from the Hall of Fame, to ban them as an active player. Clase is a 2-time reliever of the year, a 3-time All-Star. He is a big name in Major League Baseball. Ortiz certainly to a lesser extent. But if you're going to send that message, I mean, you got to do it early and often. So certainly from a Major League Baseball perspective, these players have been placed on administrative leave, paid leave. I don't expect either of them to be playing next year and moving forward. So that could be a lifetime ban. it could be a year or two, but again, you're not rooting for it if depending on your perspective. But if these charges are found and there seems to be some credibility, I think a lifetime ban is certainly well within play. And on the criminal side, right, you just stack up these money laundering charges, these fraud charges, these bribery charges. You're looking at decades in prison if you have a conviction. And certainly, we'd be remiss to point out that both players have denied the allegations, and they said the payment transactions are for lawful activity. But this irregular betting pattern, I think, still stands out. So it's going to be a very hard hill to climb. Obviously, again, innocent until proven guilty, but this irregular betting pattern, these sites flag it for a reason, and it's certainly could have false positives. But it seems like from the evidence adduced so far, this happened on a number of occasions, and on those occasions, when you match up the irregular bets to the actual pitches, the pitches themselves were irregular. So it's a very hard battle at this point for both players.
And Dan, there's also some time going back on this because we're going back to some of the stuff going back to as far as 2023 that we're seeing. So there's a whole bunch of time that the feds have been looking at this and looking at both of these pitchers involved in this allegedly. How, in your eyes, when you look at this isn't new for sports betting scandals in sports, but how does this case compare to historical sports scandals like Pete Rose, the 1919 Black Sox, or in the NBA, Tim Donaghy with his refereeing scandal in terms of the legal implications and the threat to a sport's integrity? How does this one compare to some of those?
Yeah, this is the interesting thing. And I tell my students all the time, like, people can blame, the legalization of gambling for all these activities. But, the truth is, like, this stuff has been happening for years, going back to Arizona State or Boston College or CUNY. Like, there's been point shaving scandals for years. But it's the technology that's being able to catch it on this instance. And I will say, Dexter, what I think is unique to this story and to the NBA story, and even to the Jontay Porter saga that was a year prior, are these individual player props. Like, you can talk about Tim Donaghy, Pete Rose, the Black Sox scandal. Those are a team throwing the World Series or points being shaved off a game. Those are kind of traditional bets, be it money line bets, spread bets, over-under bets. These are micro player props that kind of, you could call them exotic bets, but those have really risen in this era of DraftKings and FanDuel in the legalization era, in the last 10 years. So there really is no, like, you can bring up Pete Rose, yes, it involved gambling, but it's one particular prop that's being bet on, be it Jontay Porter unders or Terry Rozier unders. That's one player dictating the result. So there really is no historical comp because player props weren't bet at this frequency up until the last 10 years. So it's fairly new, but in that sense, it really doesn't involve like collaborative effort. If the prop here for Clase or Ortiz is, will a pitcher throw, and this is what was alleged to be gambled on, right? Will a pitcher throw a pitch under 95 miles an hour, or will it be an off-speed pitch versus a fastball? Like, that doesn't require coordination of any of the other 8 players in the field. It just requires the pitcher to make a decision. So, that's very tough to police. It's very tough to find out because it's really just that one player as opposed to a coordinated effort, which you need on a point shaving scandal, in basketball, or the Black Sox allegedly throwing the World Series way back when. Like, you need coordinated effort of every player on that team. So, yeah, I think it's hard to find a true historical comp to this.
Yeah, it is. And that also is what makes it a bit scarier in this situation too, right? Because of the fact that you have a situation where it's just one player that can impact this, and it's just really scary. But you made a statement earlier in saying that the toothpaste is out of the tube here, in which I would agree. So when you look big picture at this, Dan, this is the last thing from me. Do you believe this case could force a reevaluation of how leagues and sportsbooks handle micro betting on individual plays or pitches, given how easy, as you just kind of pointed out, it could be to manipulate? Do you think this could, maybe force a reevaluation of how leagues and sportsbooks handle this?
I think you have to. And I think you could, there is a comp for this. You could look at the NBA, right? Jontay Porter, who we've referenced a couple times, was a two-way player. And for lack of a better term, that's basically like a minor leaguer being shifted between, the G League and the pros. And at that period of time, these websites offered lines on any active player. The over-under line would be set at like 1.5, right? Or a half a point. Will they score a point? And those players at the end of the bench that are on two-way salaries or minimum salaries, those players certainly have more incentive to bet because they're not making, right, like LeBron's salary in the tens of millions of dollars. They're on minimum salaries, and they might not even be in the NBA in the next year. So, in the NBA, in the wake of the Jontay Porter saga, I think tightened up their prop lines, right? They're only offering lines on, we'll say, the top 8 guys in the rotation or 7 guys, but they're not really putting in the guys at the end of the bench. when you go to a Major League Baseball game now, you could just go on DraftKings and FanDuel, they offer live odds on any pitcher that has the ball in their hands. And who needs that, right? Do we need to be able to bet on every single pitch, fastball, curveball? Like, do we need that? Is that what brings gamblers to the table, the ability to live bet every pitch, as opposed to betting, the overall outcome of the game? So I think baseball is going to have to look certainly at what basketball has done, and I think football has to do the same, and hockey, and really kind of limit the amount of action to players, that certainly aren't making the money. The interesting thing here, and Dexter, this is why there's some comps to Terry Rozier. Terry Rozier had made tens of millions of dollars in the NBA. Clase was a 3-time All-Star, 2-time reliever of the year. He had made his money, and that's what's a little dangerous. Like Ortiz was not. Ortiz was closer to a minimum level guy, so you kind of get it from that standpoint. But when guys making tens of millions of dollars make the decision to make a couple thousand in exchange for a bet, as is alleged here, that's got to be pretty scary.
Yep.
So baseball, I think, really has to look very closely at how they limit this action, and they have to find ways to disincentivize players for partaking in this activity.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Dan, in terms of guys who are making millions of dollars that are willing to then get in this. And the place that we didn't even get into, but it's another conversation for another day, is you wonder how this could then affect collegiate athletics, right? If players who are making millions of dollars on the professional level can be manipulated into this kind of behavior, then you wonder how it could affect amateur or college athletics. It shall be interesting to see. But a good conversation, Dan. We appreciate the time. Everybody check out Dan Lust, a sports and entertainment lawyer, one of the best in the business when it comes to talking about this. And Dan, I appreciate you joining us to give us your perspective legally on its whole situation with the baseball indictment of Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz. Thank you so much, my friend.
My pleasure.